my name is Patrick Harvey, and my entry for the ENCMP 100 programming contest is a game of Battleship, coded in MATLAB. The original inspiration for this project came from a sort of conjunction of a couple different things. The matrix manipulation tools that MATLAB offers seemed sort of to lend themselves to some kind of grid-based game. And at the same time, the UI figure stuff, specifically the user input options for it, made me think that I could maybe use them to give whatever I built a maybe slightly more analog quality in terms of UX, not in terms of actual mechanics, by using dials and toggles rather than more normal methods of input. So you'll see, this is the beginning section. I can move strips around, they'll snap into place on the grid. I can rotate them. So I'll just set up a game here. From that initial decision, it was definitely a learning process. We didn't really cover graphics in massive detail, so I spent a lot of time browsing the documentation to make sure I knew what I was doing, as well as just trial and erroring stuff. I did a lot of the basic construction of the UI before I even worked out the finer details of what exactly I would be writing in terms of the code. Speaking of the code, it relies on a lot of objects, which is probably to be expected given the graphics-heavy nature of the game. And I'll just start here now that I'm done. I found that I could often take advantage of the properties of graphics objects, not just as a way to modify their appearance and their behavior, but also as coding tools. So for example, each ship here is given a number from 3 through 7 as a way to identify it. I store that number in the user data property of the ship, and then I use it as a way to easily convert between the data in the matrices and the actual graphics on the screen. So whenever a ship is placed on the grid in that setup stage, the corresponding elements in the grid matrix are multiplied by the ship's number, and that matrix defaults to 1. And then it's a simple matter to just find that ship again, or to identify which ship is in a given location on the grid. Or it's also easy to check whether ships are overlapping. I didn't demonstrate that, but it won't let you start the game if ships are overlapping because it'll be multiplied. For example, 3 times 4 is 12, which is greater than 7, so you can just check if the value of any element in the grid is greater than 7. I also used a lot of callback functions. That drag setup relies on 3 callback functions, namely drag start, drag stop, and dragging. So a callback function such as drag start is innately tied to one or more objects. This is tied to all of the ship objects, and it's called from that object. So in this case, when the ship is clicked on, it will call drag start and pass into it the object and the event, which is important here. So that object, then I can use that object. So in this case, I set current equal to the object. I can pass that object as an argument into label set, which will change the display box. And I can also modify, in this case, I'm modifying a different callback function. I'm modifying the image clicked function for object to be drag stop, so that when you click it again, it will stop moving. The most difficult part of this project by far was the code for the computer's guesses. And I'll just start maybe playing here. The code for the computer's guesses, in the early versions, just guessed randomly, but that was really never going to be practical. It wouldn't be competitive, and it also wouldn't seem right to the player. Ultimately, the code for the computer relies heavily on a lot of if-else statements, and a lot of while loops to ensure that it's able to play with a reasonable level of skill. I ended up using a cell array and a couple of other variables to let the computer sort of remember things, like how a human would. It stores the coordinates of hits and misses, as well as other things, such as whether it believes the ship it's targeting is horizontal or vertical. And then it makes decisions based on those. That took, as you might be able to tell here, in this computer turn section, a lot of code. And a lot of if-else statements, like I said, nested. Overall, I'm really quite pleased with this project. Quite apart from being a fun little game, it was a really good way to familiarize myself with MATLAB graphics in particular, and with object-oriented programming in general, both of which were quite new to me. And it also kind of made something clear that I think is maybe an important thing to remember when you're learning programming in general, which is there's really nothing wrong with just getting stuck into it. I learned a lot of this by trial and error, by reading docs, by just screwing around until I got it to work, especially with the graphics stuff. When something wasn't quite right, I just, I had Google, I had the MATLAB docs, and I could keep trying stuff until it did work. Thanks for your attention, and thanks for your time.